Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the Sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. If you struggle to forgive in the face of what feels like injustice, this episode is for you. As I mentioned in previous episodes, forgiveness is a complex concept and something many of us struggle with. This is why I broke down this forgiveness series into 5 sessions to give each defining element its own space. In this 4th episode, you'll gain some insights into how forgiveness and healing work when justice hasn't been served. You'll hear about a recent crisis I survived that tested my forgiveness mindset. And you'll get some tips to navigate your own offenses and hurts as you cultivate restorative justice. In the final episode in this series, we'll also explore moving beyond our internal barriers and negative emotional reactions to rebuild our forgiveness mindset. And if you haven't yet, please consider joining my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community support. Today's focus will narrow in on relational offenses and hurts, not those illegal acts and crimes committed against us, though sometimes the relational ones can feel just as bad as the crimes committed against us. That's a whole other beast for another day. The question we need to ask ourselves is this: what is justice supposed to look like in the relationships and interactions we value? When we think about justice, our thoughts often go to retributive justice, where the offender is punished or expected to suffer in the same capacity as we did. Fair's fair, right? An eye for an eye, as the proverb goes. After all, isn't this the type of justice that we've been all conditioned to believe is the ultimate form of justice? How much time have we wasted pondering what form of justice our offender deserves? Maybe we do this so they'll fully understand how deeply they hurt us, or maybe we hope that this form of justice will teach them how it feels, and then they're less likely to repeat the offense again against us or against someone else. When I think about how this type of retaliatory justice works, where we become filled with revenge, I think about how we can spin that spider web. And I'm thinking about the anatomy of spider webs and how they are actually spun. So when a spider weaves her web, she is preparing. It's kind of like a nesting thing. She is preparing for when she can just lay her eggs. So she has to set up this whole web of survival during her most vulnerable time. So she weaves this web together, and it's an exhausting task. And then she sits and waits. And she has no control over what she's going to trap or catch. She's going to just have to accept whatever comes into her snares and sift through it to figure out what is going to nourish her and what is just garbage trapped in her web. So the very thing that is her life-giving source during this very vulnerable time in her life. So you can imagine, if you haven't seen a spider web up close for yourself, how much junk gets trapped in that web, and how really it's hit or miss if she's going to get anything that's worth her time and attention. And she's stuck with what the web traps. She doesn't have the energy or the ability to go out there and hunt like she normally would hunt. So she just has to take whatever garbage comes in there. And I'm sure she could do a lot better if she's out there living her best life and has access to all the other resources that are out there in the larger world. But she is confined to the area that her web is. And when we think about how does that apply to us? Well, the web keeps us from doing the things that we need and want to do. We kind of weave ourselves into this very isolated space that collects more junk than it's worth. And we have to sift through that junk and decide what it is we want to bring into our lives and what will actually nourish us. And when you think about how the greater world, just beyond this web that we weave for ourselves, is out there and everything in it is ours for the taking if we just get back out there. Have to think about that when we're stuck in this cycle of offense and unforgiveness, how that can be this exhausting, life-sucking work, like the spider in her life cycle. And by the way, she dies after she gives birth. I mean, she puts everything, all of her energy into weaving this web and then having the babies and then dying. Let that sink in. So do we want to put all of that energy into something that sucks the last bit of good life out of us? Or do we want to get back out there? Do we want to figure out how we can get back out there and live our best life? The bottom line is we cannot change the people around us or make them understand how they offended us, especially those who are addicted to their toxic thinking, behavior, and problems. So if you can't even get them to see the hurt and the offense, how exactly do you intend for them to feel remorse and regret or to even be interested in restoration, into rebuilding things? You know, that's the sad reality in a lot of instances, and why it sometimes feels like they're committing a crime against us, even in relationships, even if it's not illegal activity. It can feel like that. It can feel like that type of a violation against us because, you know, you can sense that lack of empathy, that lack of accountability. And that's a whole other layer to the offense or to the suffering that we also have to work through. And, you know, at a very basic human level, we all have that craving to feel seen, heard, and validated, especially when it relates to our suffering. When we feel offended, this need to feel seen, heard, and validated is compounded. When these basic needs go unmet, it really can feel like the biggest injustice in the whole experience. I can relate to that. I know you can probably relate to that too. In my experience, there are lots of reasons people don't validate our emotions that surround an offense. Most of these reasons have nothing to do with us, though at times people may dismiss our suffering because of the hangups that they have toward us too. That's also a thing that you have to keep in mind. Maybe they don't see our suffering as significant or serious. They too may be offended by something in our exchange and therefore struggle to be empathetic in the crosshairs of our own offended state. This recently happened to me in a small scale when I was staying with one of my daughters who's away at college right now, where we were started to get into a heated discussion about something, and she was getting really sensitive about something, and then started going into this default mold where she starts fault finding, and she's trying to place blame on me where it didn't belong. And then I was like, oh my gosh, you know, in that raw moment, I started to be offended. Like, here I am trying to help you, and I don't feel like you're not only not appreciating it, but that you don't even recognize what I'm trying to do to help you be successful. And so as the conversation started to progress, she eventually got so upset. And I was watching what I was saying because I didn't want to say anything out of my frustration or anger. So I was really carefully monitoring what I was saying back. I was also doing that thing where I'm starting to self-preserve and withdraw a little bit, taking a few steps backward in how I'm engaging with her. She ends up going in the other room and she starts sobbing. And then I just leave her in there, you know, and she's now like 10 seconds into sobbing. She's like, I can't believe that you're not even going to comfort me. And she's still going on and on. And so I was like, I'm not going in there right now because she's still slurring insults at me while she's sobbing. And I wanted to comfort her, but then I was like, gosh, she seems pretty upset. And I know when I get that upset, I don't want to see the person who's irritating me like that. I don't want them to be the one who comforts me. So I was like, even though I didn't feel like it was merited, her frustration, the way that, you know, the things that she was saying, I
still was like, I still empathized with her. I still cared about her frustration. And I knew that there was something else that was triggering it. It had nothing to do with me and it had nothing to do with the current situation. So I took that step back and I was right in the other room. It's not like I stormed out. It's not like I said, I'm going home. That's it. I'm packing up my stuff. I just was like, let's just give it a couple minutes. Let's give it some breathing space. And me not going to comfort her was the thing that just perpetuated everything. And then once I finally went into her and worked past some of that, those obstacles, those walls that she was trying to put up. We hashed things out. I was able to comfort her, but it was like in that moment, it was really hard for me to comfort her while I felt offended and I felt that that offense was continuing. And it's like running in to the actual thing that's causing your own hurt and suffering sometimes becomes complicated in a situation like this. So we worked it out, and thankfully we worked it out and salvaged the rest of our time together. And that was, that was nice. But it was just one of those reminders that sometimes it's hard to be there entirely for someone else in the heat of the moment when you also feel like you're being offended while they feel like they were offended. And it's just like this back and forth thing. It just becomes this very vicious cycle. And there are no real winners in that situation. On a personal level, the most satisfying form of justice, it usually comes in the form of restorative justice, not retributive justice. Of course, it's natural for us to hope that the person who offended us or wronged us learns from it. It's also natural for us to want them to pay for an injustice. But how do we decide what that payment should be or what that punishment should be? That's a really sticky situation. Trust me when I say that justice always catches up with people, whether it's illegal activity or just something that wounds and offends us. So let's explore the dangers of that eye for an eye type of revenge justice mindset. In historical contexts, this principle signified proportional consequences for the harm caused. Retaliation had limits on it that had to match, not exceed the damages. So, what do you know to be true about vengeance and retaliation? I mean, really think about that. The answer brings us to another proverb: violence begets violence. What we may view as evening the score often incites a vicious cycle of escalating violence or retaliation between us and our offender that plays out like a wicked tennis match. There's no real winners in this game. There's no real match in this game either. This is a counterproductive way of operating on so many levels. First, is this retaliatory, vengeful person a reflection of the caliber of person that you aspire to be? I know we've talked in episodes prior to this about, really preserving and protecting that character that we want to continue to develop and evolve into. And so we have to be very careful not to slip into, even for a moment, character traits that are going to be counterproductive and move us far away from the quality of moral fiber that we want to have, because it's a lot harder to rebuild and come back from that than it is to just say, okay, as tempting as it is, I'm just not going there. It's not worth undoing all of the hard work that I've put into myself to this point. And when it comes to building those valued, healthy relationships, is this the foundation that you honestly believe will keep that standing strong after you're all said and done? Like, I get it. Sometimes we get offended by someone and it's just not that deep with the person. And then we just, whatever. But really, what I'm trying to talk to you about here today are those instances in relationships and interactions where we do care about the depth and we do care about getting some type of resolution, but also in any of these instances, regardless of the depth of relationship or the lack of relationship outside of the single isolated interaction, is that we still have to figure out how to operate in that forgiveness mindset, because we're the one that's ultimately impacted when we don't. The other person really isn't impacted when we don't. And this is why it's critical to our own well-being to develop a healthy mindset about how to cultivate justice in our lives in the aftermath of an experience of injustices or just even offenses. Sometimes it's just a sense of feeling offended. It wasn't something that the person intended to do. Sometimes we just walk away with those hurt feelings and those negative emotions from an interaction with someone else. And the second question to consider here is how will we wrestle through these instances where we feel a sense of injustice so that we can make peace with them and go on living our best life? Restorative justice at its core is focused on repairing the offense or the hurt through direct dialogue between the parties involved. And this encourages accountability and self-reflection by everyone who's involved. So when you think about like, oh, I'm just going to confront the offender, if you're not doing any type of self-reflecting, if you are not trying to figure out like, let me expand my understanding of this interaction, let me try to understand some things, what are some things that I already know that I can help apply to this? If we're not doing those things to broaden our understanding and collect all of the available information before we start making those judgments about it, before we take any actions beyond the initial I forgive you stance, then we're not ready. So there are things that we need to do before we go into these dialogues, which I will get into a couple of those strategies toward the end of the episode here. So this brings me to a recent experience I had that rehashed a lot of old trauma, and it left me feeling quite abandoned, alone, and freaked out. And I was in an unsafe situation. So over the weekend, I ended up getting trapped in a cabin with two bats, not one, two. And I did not have a clear way out of the cabin to safety without jeopardizing my safety. So I'm stuck at this one end of the cabin. These two bats, when I got into bed and turned off the lights, is when they decided to come out of hiding. It was really late by the time that I went to bed because I was up working because I'm a workaholic. And so I was up working and it was like just after maybe 1 o'clock, maybe closer to 1:30. And I get into bed after I turn off the lights, after I pull down all the blinds, which they were probably right there in the blinds when I pulled them down, and they start flying around and they're dive bombing me over the bed. That was the first thing that they did. And I was kind of sleeping in a room that's more like a sunroom and the whole cabin's open. So there's like a bedroom in the sunroom, the living room, and then another bedroom at the back of the house. And then on the other side of the living room is the kitchen dining room combo. And this door to get in and out of the cabin is at the end of the kitchen, the back side of the house. So I'm in the front corner of the house. I have all these windows and they're small windows. There's a ton of them, but they're small. And so I'm just trying to get my bearings. My keys are in the kitchen. The door I need to open so that they could probably get out or I could get out is in the kitchen. And they're circling in the bedroom, in the living room, in the kitchen, and they're spending a lot of time in the kitchen. And so I'm like, okay, every time I'm trying to keep my eye on them, at first I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if there's two, there's three, I don't know. But I'm freaking out because they're dive bombing me and I am in my underwear and tank top. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even dressed properly. So I am trying to find my shorts. Where are my shorts that I just took off? And I have no shoes on. I finally get the screen out because up to that point, I'm using a pillow that's like my flimsy pillow to try to bat them away from me when they're coming into my face. I mean, they were just swooping by me. They were like dive bombing into my face. It was crazy. And it felt like a nightmare. And if you've ever seen Stephen King's The Birds, it felt like The Birds. And I did see that as a kid, and it was traumatizing as a kid. And I never fully recovered. So this was one of those living nightmare moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm trapped in the birds. And of course, I realized I'm not going to probably end right here in this situation in a bloodbath, but the thought did cross my mind that I could get bit by one of them. And it is rabies season, and I know that it's, not common, but if you get bit by a bat, they make you go through the 3 stages of the shots. And I know this because we're already dealing with the bat issue at another one of my loved ones' homes. And when they started talking to us about the protocol, they were like, look, you get the shot and you have to get a series of 3 over the course of like, I don't know if it's a month or 2 months or whatever, but you cannot be around other humans for like 4 months. I don't know how they expect people to isolate for 4 months, but there are particular sets of people who are very compromised to being exposed to you once you have these shots for 4 months. And so I'm like, oh my God, like I just accepted a teaching job. I cannot not work. That's not an option. I don't just get to collect unemployment. That's not how adjunct teaching works. If I don't go to work, I don't get paid. And so I'm like, oh my God, I can't not go to work. Like this isn't an option. So that's also in the back of my head. Like I cannot let one of these things bite me as much as I don't want to have a bite or multiple bites. So that's in the back of my head too. Like protect yourself, do not get bitten, and you need to get out of here. But more importantly, I was like, I need to get the bats out of here. So I was like, if I can make it to the door, I'm going to open up the door and the bats are going to go out because they kept circling back and forth or crossing back and forth in the kitchen. And I knew the door was big enough. By the time I finally got my shorts on first, then I pull the screen out. So I'm like, okay, let me open up some of these screens so maybe they can fly out. And then every time they flew into the room, it was like literally this much too low because they have a high flight pattern. So they were flying too high. They were never going to make it out of that window. So my only hope to get them out was the back door. So now I'm like, what am I going to do? Now it's like after 2 o'clock in the morning. I have been silently, well, I shouldn't say silently. I have been solo in my quest to try to get these bats out of the house and to get myself to safety. And finally, I call the homeowner who owns the cabin where I'm sitting, and he doesn't answer. So he calls me right back a few minutes later because he saw my call. So I'm like, oh, thank God, my help, it's right there. And then he's like, no, I'm not coming. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm not asking you to come deal with the bats. I'm just saying, can you come and open the door for them? If you open the door, they'll just fly out. I'm not asking you to come in at all. I mean, open the door and run away. And he was like, he laughed and said, no, I'm not coming. And I was like, now the panic and the anxiety starts to kick in because you think, okay, I just asked for help. Finally. And I'm not the kind of person who asks for help because it's very underwhelming. People usually just don't show up the way they're supposed to show up to help me, or they make me feel like it's a big deal that they're helping me. So I just don't ask for help a lot. In a crisis like this, I'm like, I need help. Like clearly I need help. I can't even try to get out the window at this point. I don't have shoes on, and my keys to my locked car are in the kitchen where they're actively flying in there and then coming into the bedroom and then flying in there and coming to the bedroom. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't even get to the keys. So I'm like, I could try to get out of the window, but that requires me to turn my back on them. I either have to put my head out first or my feet out first, this small window, and I'm going to break my back, which is already broken. I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I could do that safely right now. If someone were out there to help me get out the window, that was a different story. But I'm like, and I say to him, I say, you can't leave me here. I'm freaked out. They're literally dive bombing me. I'm like, please don't leave me in here. I'm not asking you to do anything other than to open the door. And he's like, yeah, no. And then I'm like, okay. Oh, okay. So now I'm like, stay calm. Because if you freak out, you're not going to be good to yourself at all. So I'm like trying to stay calm, but inside I am a wreck. And so I'm like, okay, I guess whenever you wake up, can you just come and open the door if it's not open yet? And he's like, well, that won't be till like 6 in the morning. And spoiler alert, he didn't even check on me until almost 10 o'clock in the morning. So I hang up and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm not thinking straight either because I'm in panic. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And so then I call 911. I say, I know that you guys aren't rodent people. I'm not really asking you to deal with the bats. I need help getting out of the house. And they were like, yeah, we don't come for those type of calls. So I'm on the phone for like 15 minutes trying to plead with her, like, at what point will someone come and help me? If they bite me, can I call you back and then someone will come and help me? Like, I just want to know, like, when will somebody come and help me? So now it's compounding. And I'm like, okay, I guess I need to call somebody. I'm hours away from home. I guess I need to try to get a hold of someone. At this point, it's like 2:30, 2:45 in the morning. I need to get a hold of somebody who can come out here. And even if it's 4:30, that's better than the 6 o'clock option. So I finally am like, oh my God, my daughter's at college. the same one who I had the traumatic experience with just a week ago. She's at college and she's 40 minutes away. And so I call her up and thank God she's a night owl. She was still up. So she gets in her car, races to me. And by the time she got there, they were no longer actively flying in the kitchen. And so that really devastated me because the window, literally and figuratively, for us to get those bats safely out of the kitchen or out of the house when they were flying in the kitchen actively was when I made the call next door, when I called 911. Of course, as the laws of nature have it, the moment my daughter showed up, they were not flying around like that anymore. They never went back in the kitchen. So when we finally got her in, we were like, okay, we can leave, and then I'd have to leave all of my stuff there, or we can try to get these bats out of here. And we really were invested in trying to get the bats out of the house. We really thought that we would be able to do it, especially through that open kitchen door. And then, no way. They just wanted to terrorize us. So we both have our screens as shields, and eventually we're on the bed, and they just keep flying in. They would just quiet down for a little, fly in again. It was awful. It was awful because the moment you would start to let your guard down and be like, okay, well, maybe it's going to be quiet now, they would start back up and they're talking to each other. They're quibbling back and forth to each other, like in their little whatever language, their bat talk. And we're like, oh my God, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Right. And then you'd hear them start to flap their wings and then you would see them and they just kept dive bombing us. And we're like using the screen to try to like, deter them away. And sometimes we're trying to like go out the window, like trying to fan them toward the window. And it was, but I will say that once my daughter got there, I didn't feel alone anymore. I didn't feel outnumbered. And it was just incredible to have another person there with me, someone who was not just sharing the suffering, who was validating the feelings of being treated unjustly in a moment that I should have been able to rely on simple help. And she was there to talk with me through those different emotions that I was experiencing. And we were talking about all types of things. I mean, she's been in my life for decades. So she knows some of my old trauma. She knows some of her old trauma, some of our shared trauma. So here we were, talking about these things, and it felt really great. And that was a form of justice for me also, to have somebody there, not just validating, not just sharing in it and empowering me, to keep continuing to try to, resolve this situation. It was nice to have somebody have your back that way and to know that somebody would come to you and have your back that way. And so eventually we started taking turns trying to rest because now we're there and neither one of us has enough energy to get in the car and leave. We're like, we have to rest a little bit before we can even leave. We're just exhausted. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning and we're like, when are they going to just go to bed already, these dang bats? If they're not going to leave, when are they just going to stop moving around? And so it's like, 5 o'clock, she's like, Mom, go ahead, close your eyes for a little bit. So here I am, like behind the screen and the lights on and the bugs keep coming into the open windows. And you'd start to fall asleep and I'm like trying to prep the screen so that it's not touching my nose, but it's like it kept falling into my nose and it's all full of like, I don't know, decades of dust and I'm allergic to dust. So every once in a while I'm like sneezing and then I would start to doze off and either a bug would land on me and then I would be like, oh my God, or I would sense the bat coming back in or she would go, Mom, the bat. And then I would be like, ah. So we were doing that for a couple hours. And then finally the sun came up and I knew like, okay, they're done moving. So I shut the door, pulled the blinds on the windows so that at least the bugs stop coming in the droves. I have so many bug bites still on me. I'm just constantly like itching myself. There's some like where I can't even reach to itch. It's another layer to the suffering from these stupid bats. And I want to qualify something right here. Your sense of indignation and abandonment in a time like this is valid, whether it's acknowledged or not. It does not have to be acknowledged by the other person or anyone else for it to be valid. It's not like a parking pass that you have to get validated and stamped in order for it to be valid. It counts. You were there. You lived through it. You bought the t-shirt. You burn the t-shirt. No one gets to come and say it's not valid because this or that. It's valid. You lived through it. And as I got a chance to talk through some of these emotions with my daughter, I really started to get in touch with what felt so indignant about it. And it really wasn't the bats, it was the sense of being abandoned to deal with the bats and feeling very unsafe and with no escape and no way out. And to have people that you would think would be interested in helping you in any way not be interested in for whatever reason. Okay. I haven't had a chance to hear this person's reasoning behind that because when he finally came over in the afternoon, because when I didn't respond to the text I got at almost 10 o'clock, I was like, I'm still angry and I'm still dealing with it. And then I was like, okay, again, talking about my own character, I have a choice to make here. I can continue to be the person that I say I want to be and do the right things, even though I feel like I'm living through an injustice right now. So I went around the house once I had a cup of coffee. Then I started going through the inside of the house, seeing if I could find them in daylight with light on my side and try to get them out of the house at that point. Because at that point, I have an advantage over them. So can I find where they're hiding? And I could not find where they were hiding in the house. So now I'm like, okay, let me go around the outside of the house because this isn't my first experience or my second experience with bats. So I know all of the protocol. What's the point of entry? Can you see any, damage? Can you see them from the outside? So I'm going around the outside of the house looking for these different things. And I probably invested, I don't know, like an hour and a half between looking on the inside, looking on the outside. So I was like, okay, I can't see anything. I will share all this stuff with the homeowner and it's up to him now. So I go in the cabin and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start packing up my stuff and cleaning up all of the things that I messed while I was there. So I'm trying to go through the house stealthily because I don't want to accidentally, come across the bats now. So I'm like doing everything one-handed and a lot of instances where I have the screen up to my face. Eventually, when we're like, okay, we have to sleep. We have to sleep and we can't leave at this point, all of your stuff here. So right when the sun was about to start coming up, I was like, okay, I'm going to put the sheet over the headboard and we have our two screens on the outside on each one of us. So we're looking out and it's laying on our side. And so that we can get the air coming through too, because it was so hot in that darn cabin. And then putting yourself completely under the covers adds more heat. And so, we have this fort that we're in. I think I got like 2.5 hours of very disturbed sleep because, again, the bugs. So the bats never moved again, like after 6 o'clock in the morning, but the bugs kept finding their way in on the other side of the screen and landing on us and just freaking us out and startling us awake. So it was a really restless sleep that I was getting. So finally, I just got up and started going about my day and I definitely was very lethargic. So I was moving slow, but nonetheless going through the motions of getting things in order. And so I ended up packing up and coming home and I ended up reaching out to a few other people who were in this circle of friends and nothing, total silence in the aftermath. And that was kind of a compounded layer to the suffering. This idea that for whatever reason, no one's concerned that I experienced this. And sure, in my case, it would be nice if someone acknowledged how unacceptable it was to be left in the situation and denied what I thought was simple help. But at the very least, I really hoped that someone in that circle would show up and just validate the awfulness of my experience. And that's often what we're just trying to do. I'm not trying to get anybody to go and say something, do something. I mean, it's already done. It's already done. So, when we think about justice, what does justice look like in the aftermath of the offense? The thing is already done. You can't go back and fix it. You can't put it back together. You can't even make somebody go through the same identical experience to learn exactly what you went through. And of course, I'm still in the raw of dealing with the emotions. It's only been a week, but I feel like I've lived through a dog year in this week. I have been experiencing night terrors, night sweats, like in the inability to sleep through the night. I'm constantly flinching at shadows when I'm walking around my house, even though I'm home. And, like I don't get bothered by bugs, but they're really bugging me. So if I feel like something might be crawling on me, I'm like freaking out, like somebody like look, see if it's there, like kill it, get it off me. And just I feel out of character. I feel like I'm out of character and I feel overly sensitive and I'm really trying to work through it and I'm really trying to work through the negative emotions that I have so that I don't carry them into all these other interactions and life goes on. So this week I'm back in the classroom with a brand new set of classes, brand new set of students who need to see me at my best. And so I am trying to work on my levels of exhaustion. I'm trying to work on keeping a good attitude. I'm trying to work on bringing my best A game to this classroom and to the start of what I hope to be a really amazing term. And that requires me to not walk in offense. I have to walk in forgiveness. The sucky part, and you're going to experience this if you haven't already, is that we're going to put ourselves out there in a vulnerable way, and our offense will likely be compounded. And even when we decide, okay, I'm going to make myself further vulnerable by sharing with the person who offended you your deep feelings. So I should probably backtrack and say that when I was telling this friend what I had done to assess the situation and what he really needs to do moving forward, because now the bats were his problem. Like I'd been in the house for, at this point, like 12 hours dealing with the bats before I ended up leaving. And I went through all these things. And the only thing that he apologized for was he was like, I'm really sorry that the bats got in. And I was like, that's not even in your control. You can't control that the bats got in the house. I am devastated that I was left here by myself. That's the part. I needed very simple help, and you left me here with them and with no clear way out of the house. And thank God my daughter came. So I had this, conversation. I'm not going to rehash the whole entire conversation, but I had this opportunity to share with him some of my feelings and the reasoning behind some of those feelings. And I just left him with that. I left him with good advice about what to do moving forward. Whether he chooses to do that or not is up to him. So I shared all these other things about the negative emotions that I had, and I tried to do it in as loving of a way as I possibly could because I care about the relationship, even though I am completely shocked by this incident and the way that it played out. And I have lost some respect and I've definitely lost some trust for this individual. And so, again, you can't control how another person does or does not continue to engage or respond after the fact. You can't control how anybody in the larger circle responds or doesn't respond, or how long it's going to take for these important conversations to happen if they do get to happen. So as I reflected on this aspect of my experience, I remembered a clinical behavior issue that I studied a few years ago. So some people will not even acknowledge something negative about another person that they care about. So me waiting for people in this circle to acknowledge it may not happen because they may not be able to acknowledge that someone else that they care about did something negative. They might not be able to see them in, or might not be willing to see them in a negative light. And this is the case sometimes with this condition, even if it means accepting that this person has offended, wronged, or hurt them or someone else that they care about. They just can't do it, or they just won't do it. This is actually a survival behavior that stems from a fear of conflict, a lack of self-awareness, insecurity, both insecurity within the relationships or an inner insecurity in the self, feelings of guilt and shame, and or emotional immaturity. This kind of behavioral dysfunction, if I could call it, damages relationships as it creates a clear disconnection between everybody involved. It also manifests those defensive reactions or silent treatments that invalidate the suffering of those who have been hurt or offended. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The most traumatic part of this experience for me was seeing how someone I care about was completely indifferent to my suffering and had no visible remorse or just outward reaction to refusing to help me. I'm the type of person who can't stand seeing someone else suffer. So if I'm there or I am aware of someone suffering and I am within reaching distance for helping them, I will often just step in without saying, "Do you need my help?" I'll often just go and just like get to work. Like, okay, what needs to be done here? So that really alarmed me because we judge people based on our own biases and our own behaviors. So I just naturally assumed that when I asked, it was just going to be met with the same kind of qualities that I would have extended in the situation at a really baseline. Just open the door. Please open the door. And so it was really, really jarring to be on the receiving end of another person's deliberate inaction. I had a hard time reconciling that, and not just in the moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm completely on my own here. Oh my God, I am really abandoned here. And that could be devastating in a crisis. Again, it doesn't matter in that moment. I'm sure eventually I'll get to hear something more about the situation, but it doesn't negate my moment of suffering in the crisis that I really felt that I was in. And we don't have to agree on whether or not someone else feels like I was in a crisis. If somebody doesn't share that opinion with me, it doesn't invalidate that I very much felt like I was in a crisis. Like, bats are not safe. Like, I learned a ton about bats, more than I want to know about bats. Maybe I'll write a children's book about bats now because now I know so much about them. But they also carry a fungus on them that isn't treatable with the antibiotics that we have in our arsenal of pharmaceuticals. So here, when they get into your living spaces and they're touching your stuff, and if you come into contact with that bacteria, that fungus that they're carrying, and now you get sick and it's not treatable, like they mean business. And my other daughter said something to me because we've been dealing with bats in another capacity, and we're like, these dang bats. I said to her, when she goes, what the heck? We were just dealing with bats, and now here I'm dealing with two bats. And I said, well, clearly they're not endangered anymore. We keep hearing all of these bat occurrences happening. They cannot possibly be the endangered species that they used to be. So now she's thinking about it. She calls me up the other day and she's like, I think I have a theory. I think that they're not only are they like not endangered anymore and they're overpopulating, they're inbreeding to such an extent that, like the barn cats that start to wander around and they're just kind of stupid creatures and they're just not acting right in the head. She said, I bet you these bats are like inbreeding to such an extent that they're just not right in their head. That could be why they're like dive bombing your face and just doing out of character things where people are like, oh, bats are sweet. Oh, they're this, they're that. But yeah, I'm sure they're all those things, but you're not thinking about all that when they're dive bombing your face, coming at you two at a time. Great. I'm glad that they're cute and, everybody says they're harmless. They didn't feel harmless in that moment. And so, like any other relationship where we have this experience of offense, we may be left with this broken trust and loss of respect as a result, which has to be worked through if we hope to have a meaningful relationship with these individuals. Now, I am still working on the wounds from this, and I'm putting in the work to heal emotionally. And I sincerely hope restorative justice and open communication happen in this circle of friends. I can't force it. It just has to happen. People have to be willing to do those things. And that doesn't, again, decide the level of forgiveness. You can forgive and you can heal individually. You can heal relationships, or those relationships don't heal. Like, there's all other gray area in between that as well. And so the important reminder here is, despite what people say, time alone is not going to heal this broken trust, your offense, or the hurt. Real healing comes from the conversations, the forgiveness, and the change that happens as a result of these things. Even the conversations that we have with ourselves and trusted confidants enhance our healing. So our relationships do rely on having important conversations where there's an offense between two people. Relationships and the love that fuels them thrive when issues are faced, not ignored or swept under the rug. Our own healing and restoration are controlled from within, where we have to choose to forgive even when these conversations don't happen or go as planned or produce the change that we hoped for. If this leaves you with a larger sense of feeling alone in your moment of suffering, you'll appreciate the final episode in this series, which focuses on how to move beyond negative emotions and our internal barriers to build and restore a forgiveness mindset.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Friday. Ciao.